Blog Talk Radio.
This is Peter. This is our May 31st Blog Talk Radio bi-weekly radio address. Usually this is on a Wednesday, but I had to move it to a Sunday due to complications I have next week. I hope everyone out there is doing well. The first hour I'm going to take questions. The second hour I'm going to have Jaque and Roxanne on again, and I have a series of questions for them, and they have some talking points that they want to address as well. And the first thing I want to say before I jump into your questions is I know some of you out there have been waiting for chapters, the chapter templates, and that's something that we've been developing. It's taken a lot longer just to get everything nice and clean. And as far as the American templates, American chapters are concerned, the 50 states, we are going to actually be hosting all of those. I can't remember if I mentioned this last broadcast, but if you want to have a custom template, you're free to do so, but we're going to create a server with all 50 sites hosted in a very simple architecture, just so it can be easy and straightforward, and the information can be transferred very easily without too much overlap or misguided elements, which tends to happen when there's full independence. But the 50 chapters should be up this week, and then I already have people on hand that are going to start maintaining their section. And if any of you out there in the community groups that work in a particular state, and you want to head or help head a state chapter, please email media@thezeitgeistmovement.com and let me know your background and what you think and how you heard about the movement and stuff like that, and we can try to get things set up. This is the next level as far as the states. We've got to get state chapters and then eventually city chapters. And again, the templates will be available for international chapters and city territorial chapters internationally as well. So that's one aspect. The second one is the lecture presentation event packet. That's something that I've taken forever to do, but I'm basically going to have a open source slideshow similar to what I did in New York, similar to what you see in the video that's presented, and it's going to be in a program called Open Office, which is cross-platform, open source, I believe, and anyone can utilize it, and it can be easily transferable into the presentation software of your choice, such as, the Macintosh program and PowerPoint. I can't remember the name of the Macintosh program right now, but those are the two dominant ones. So that will be a big package that will also assist anybody that wants to have an event and provide tips in general. So I'm hoping, and that will be available through a torrent. It will have lots of different files for it and pamphlets and information. So I'm hoping to get that together soon. I apologize for delaying that. This is really what everybody should be doing. They should be learning the information and setting up small events in your area. That's the most critical thing in my mind. The third thing is this media project, which I mentioned the last radio show, the Zeitgeist Media Project, and I'm going to be in touch with the Venus Project about this because I want to get their input and establish something that's nice and effective. For instance, we've already talked about people that are involved in 3D. If you want to help render some of Jaque's drawings, some of Jaque's models, and create these environments. That would be wonderful, because that's really what needs to happen. We need to get this technologically up to date. So much amazing work that Jaque's done, and if you have the ability to put that into a computer, so to speak, and output a really nice 3D rendering in motion, perhaps advocating lifestyle, anything like that, simple, of course, initially, that would be wonderful, and that's exactly what the media project initially is going to be about, but as I mentioned last radio show, we'll also have social content and other aspects like that. I'm probably going to have another website dedicated to that. So those are the three main things I want to talk about. things are slowly developing with the website. It's just been one battle after another to get things where they need to be in a comprehensible manner, but we're going to get there. And again, I want to thank all of you out there for your patience and everybody that's been helping, too. There's been lots of volunteers that are helping, and I really appreciate that as well. So let's jump straight into your questions. Number one, how does the Venus Project Society decide on two different solutions to solving a single technological problem? Well, that's an interesting question. Obviously, it would be based on merit. Which is the most conservative, the most efficient, and the most sustainable? And I think that would weed itself out. I'm not quite sure what you mean. I assume if you have two equal approaches, well, obviously there'd probably be an aspect of them that isn't equal, and then you weed them out. If they're absolutely equal, then there's really no argument. So I hope that answers your question. Number two, if I helped to patent a technology or a process of some sort, would it be a bad thing to donate royalties earned, if any, directly to a sustainable cause, for example, the Venus Project? Wouldn't donating 35% of it to the Venus Project be a good thing, even if I worked for one of the Federal Reserve-supported banks? I know exactly what you mean by that, and it really just has to do with kind of a conscientious threshold, if you will. We all have to engage the system. We all have to do what we need to do to survive on some level. And as we all know, at least I hope, hopefully most of you do, that what we're doing is inherently corrupt. That's just the way the system is. You can't engage in this system without engaging in some form of dishonesty and hence corruption. That's just the fabric of it. So you have to pick your poison. As most of you might know, I've worked in advertising, one of the most hideous institutions out there that does absolutely nothing. But I've had to do it because it's profitable, and you do what you have to do, and it maintains my particular expertise in video editing and music and things that, in abstraction, I appreciate doing. I appreciate creation, but I don't necessarily appreciate what I'm creating when it comes to advertising. So if you work for a bank, in the end of Zeitgeist Addendum, I talk about quitting these institutions that continue to perpetuate the system. And obviously, I certainly recommend that. We don't want to perpetuate the system. For example, the extreme to me would be if you work in the armament industry. If you're making munitions, get out. It's like, it's just such a hideous thing to be involved in. If we had that type of conscientious objections, occurring in society outright, then a lot of the industries that exist to support this empire, to support the industrial complex, to support the media complexes that pollute us, they would eventually cease to exist. But as we all know, this is a self-serving system, and it's self-preserving, and the only way you can get a job is usually having to participate in some self-preserving institution, and that's unfortunate. So to answer your question, do what you feel you can while maintaining your own dignity. That's about all I can say, because I can't make that decision for you. Number three, have you heard of the new film Future for Sale? Yes, I know Maya Borg. I look forward to seeing her film. She's featuring the Venus Project. I haven't heard much about it recently. I know they're doing a lot of work, and I assume it's coming out fairly soon. I'm not quite sure, but I can't wait to see it. And any new films coming out that are positive in regard to the Venus Project, I think naturally will be good. Hopefully, she's been under the tutelage of Jaque and Roxanne to a certain degree with this, and she's come to visit them many times. I met her in Los Angeles. I did a short interview with her. I have no idea if that's going to be included. But nevertheless, I'm looking forward to any new material out there about this direction. So, and if it's great, then we'll definitely promote it on the site. Number four, how can one address the egos of the differentially advantaged with our movement issues when their support systems encourage and reward the opposite? Well, first you have to explain the negative consequences of what they're doing. Then you have to explain what life could be. And then you have to kind of try to find their compassionate side. For example, if you meet a multimillionaire, they have it fairly well to do. They're not going to just want to roll over. They have succeeded in this structure to the extent where they don't really have to worry about themselves that much. They have their abundance in their mind. So the only thing you can really do is appeal to their compassionate side and make them see how divided the planet is. Hope that you can get through to them to recognize the mass problems of wealth distribution, the exceptional poverty, the one person dying every second from starvation, the absolute destruction of the environment because of the industries that they might participate in. So, it's like what It's like when I was interviewing John Perkins, he said to me he had never met a CEO that was simply out to just do negative work and destroy something. The CEOs do what they need to maintain profitability, and then they often just moved on, basically blocking out all of the criminal activity that their company might have participated in. So, again, it comes down to the self-serving mechanism. You have to begin to appeal to them in a way that hopefully will turn them around and feel they will gain a moral perspective about what they're doing. And, that's all you can really hope for. Also, the second aspect is to explain what life could be. I agree with Jacques. I think that people in the future in the resource-based economy will live better than millionaires live today. Because if you look at what we're capable of doing, there's no reason for it not to be that way. When we consider the technological ingenuity that we have, coupled with the abundant resources that are not being utilized now, I think it's fair to say, even with the population, the general public will eat better, will be healthier, will have more access to things, than most millionaires have today, because the system is based on access. It's not just based on differential advantage-based derivatives of money, which enable someone to engage in a certain echelon of social status and acquisition. So to answer your question simplistically, you have to just try to appeal to their human side, so to speak, and that's really the best thing you can do. Number 5, do you think it is essential for people to understand that we are all products of the same system and that our values are environmentally determined, from an Iranian child to an international broker, so we stop blaming a small group of people for the problems of society today and start taking responsibility for our actions and the future of our society? Yes, I would say this is one of the most central tenets of what we're arguing. I mean, this is one path to, I guess what you could say, ego elimination and the recognition of our symbiosis. Once you realize what you are as far as being a product, and there's nothing metaphysical about this, meaning there's nothing radical about this. Those terms are highly disputed, but nevertheless, there's nothing obscure about what this point is. There's an interconnection of all things, and it's quite transparent. So once you see a tree growing, you see the tree, its pigments are affected by the nutrients in the soil. Its growth patterns are affected by its exposure to where the sun is. If it's in an extremely shady area and it's of a particular genetic makeup, it might not grow very tall because it doesn't have access to the same nutrients. It might not live very long. If you have a plant that is in an environment that's extremely pristine and it's never ever susceptible to any type of virus or anything over the course of its natural growth, and then suddenly a hurricane blows particular problems at it, environmental problems, use your imagination on that, such as things that would cause disease in the plant, since that plant hasn't developed a natural immunity by its general growth rate, meaning it hasn't had the experience in its so-called immune system to fend against things like that, then it will probably shrivel up and die once it has exposure to that. And that relates to humans as well and any other organism. So not only are we cultivated by our environment, our environment itself, even after that initial cultivation, so to speak, sorry to sound abstract here, I can't think of a better way to explain this, if your exposure doesn't allow for certain things, then those things simply are not allowed. So back to my original point, it's all environmentally determined, at least based on the fundamentals. The value systems are the most important aspect here. And then you can't go crazy and say everything's determined by environment. That, of course, isn't true. But our value systems and our understanding certainly are. And that's what it comes down to. So, you have a lot of people out there that are obsessed with what you call the New World Order crowd and the globalists. And they have these weird us against them mentalities where they assume that we have to get rid of these people. And while that might temporally be true in a very abstract sense, that's not the solution. You have to get rid of the environmental elements that are creating the propensities of these very selfish, elitist people. And until you do that, you're really not doing anything. It's always the question of do you dodge the bullet of the guy who's pointing the gun at you? And in that case, you obviously have to run if there's somebody pointing a gun at you. But when you're not in that type of harm's way, you have to begin focusing on what's going to focusing on eliminating the cause of that person who might get that gun and want to point it at you to begin with. So it's all a matter of root causes and understanding that we're all byproducts of of this environment and this culture, of course, is extremely important. And I think if people had a clear understanding of that, then they would really come to terms with how despotic this economic system, this monetaristic environment of scarcity perpetuation really is. Number 6, are cultural expressions problematic in a resource-based economy? For example, when it comes to cultural expressions such as tribal music and dance with regional styles and artwork, these are generally performed on old instruments and costumes and using ancient tools and techniques. I see what you're saying. My answer would be just because we advance technology and focus society towards, patterns of abundance and forward thinking doesn't mean that sentiment and romantic issues just become unacceptable or just disappear. There's always going to be an interest in history, and there's always going to be an interest in romantic orientation with certain issues, but it will alter in their focus. So what you're talking about is very specific, and it's not necessarily related to survival. So in regards to the arts and things like that, I see absolutely no reason why you won't have festivals that utilize ancient instruments and ancient music. It's all cultural heritage, and I think that cultural heritage is very important. But you can't get lost in tradition to the effect where it becomes dogmatic, and that's really what I'd have to say. That's why these heavy indoctrinations of religion and static patriotic notions where you have, of course, this patriot movement in the States where they want to return to some ideal. They think that at some point in American history everything used to be good, and that's actually a complete illusion. So you have to remain forward-thinking socially. You have to remain emergent, but there's no reason why you can't have sentiment and romanticism as well. It's just where do they fit? Number 7. How can we address people in the movement who are looking to make the movement their meal ticket during the transition without affecting any measurable change aside from paying their bills? I'm not exactly sure what you mean, but I think I have an understanding. I'm very sympathetic to people who must, spend their time gaining income, as most of us do. I mean, the movement itself takes a higher level of commitment. If you have to get money to participate in this, then you really shouldn't be participating in it. What I mean by that is it's either twofold. It's twofold. Basically, if you don't have any time, like none at all, well, then that's that. But if you do have time, but you're not willing to give that dedication to spread the word on your own accord, to use your communicative facilities to make anything, make just a simple YouTube video, just do something. And the higher echelon would be to create small-time events, to have groups, create a community chapter, have the courage to go out and be what you could call a leader in this. And if you can do that, then you will realize that money becomes very minuscule in that regard. And you can maintain your normal 9-to-5 job and still help out with this. And if everyone just did a little, the effect would be dramatic. So I hope that answers your question. I mean, if anyone comes into this expecting to be hired, I get emails from people that want to be hired by me, and I instantly write them back and say, there's no office for this, there's no budget for this, and at this point in time, it's really not needed. And I know a lot of you don't believe that yet, but major movements don't come from heavy monetary acquisition. It's kind of a scam, actually. If you see anybody that's talking about taking in lots of money to advance their cause, like I was on a website the other day, and they often do these things called money bombs. And on the banner for their money bomb, it said, "Fighting tyranny $1 at a time." And I almost fell out of my chair laughing how absolutely corrupt that was, because that's exactly what it is. It's complete corruption. People use movements to make money. Don't forget that. And if you wonder why I don't push that, it's because I'm well aware of the fact that we will be branded instantly if we focus, without a project, on monetary interests. Once we have a project, then there'll be a reason for it. So, there are projects that will develop. For example, Zeitgeist Day 2009 was a project. I had people pay $10 for the ticket. It was 913 seats. I basically covered my costs. I think I lost just a little bit on that because it sold out, and that was great. So money in that incorporation is the way to go. As far as larger scale projects like donations, we have to have a large project for that to be applicable for. We're not going to just take random money because we're going to get heavy scrutiny, and it's just not the way to do it. It's not the honest way to go. People don't really understand the methods that should be used. People don't understand the most effective and acceptable methods that will not gravitate towards corruption or the assumption of corruption, and that's very important to me. Where was I? Okay, number 8. I think the radio address should focus more on the transition. I think all of us can agree on the movement's basic message, so instead of discussing minor issues about life in a resource-based economy, which is too far into the future, we might not be able to achieve free speech as it is continuously being restricted. We could address the challenges we're facing now and might encounter in the transition period. We could address the challenges we face now and might encounter in the transition period and how we can overcome them. I agree. We are going to address more of that as soon as things get more developed with the site and all the information for public awareness is in full force. We have the teams operating. We have all of these things happening. Things are just not moving fast enough. As far as the transition, people need to understand what we are transitioning into extremely clearly. Otherwise, we might end up someplace very different. So while I think a lot of people will say that they understand the direction, I find that after a certain degree of analysis, many of them do not. I'd say 8 out of 10 people that think they understand, they actually don't. They don't understand the broadest element. Some people think this is a city community type concept where we want to start a new system, a new society in and of itself, like when I talk about the city systems. But that's not the case. We need to create a new social imperative, a new social outlook. This entire thing is about reorienting the culture. It's not necessarily about technology. These are all tools that will enable this new type of cultural revolution, this new revolution of consciousness, if you want to put it poetically. So I hope that makes sense. The transition is going to kind of present itself. I can give endless scenarios, but I don't want to at this point, and I probably will in the film. But really it's about getting the information out there. The transition could be very quick and very smooth if enough people were aware of the direction. It's almost like the transition will occur in and of itself once people understand, and that doesn't mean it doesn't need to be guided. Of course it does. But don't get too obsessed with the transition plan at this point. We're not there yet. And Jaque talked about this before. I might bring this up again to him when they come on. So I hope that answers your question. And yes, but the other point being that we will have to begin to address problems that will restrict the flow of information and fight for free speech on the Internet. And I've mentioned this before, and I'm keeping one eye on all of that. And we will have activism aspects that start to engage things like that soon. Number 9, what do you think about joining our forces with those religious or right-wing people who are fighting against New World Order? Should we leave the religion debate aside until we get rid of those psycho-bankers? I think I already addressed this point. Ultimately, we're not going to get rid of the psycho-bankers. They are going to keep manifesting just like the trees do. It's what the environment creates. As far as religion is a powerful staple of the zeitgeist in the world today, and we can't just shy away from the subject. I've been very courteous with this. I've tried to subdue all of the angry emails that I've gotten, all the angry websites that say I'm anti this and anti that, when I'm actually pro many things. I'm not necessarily anti anything. The issue is it's so contentious and so emotional, and I agree that we should engage in positive information rather than negative information, meaning we shouldn't bash things. We should go after positive attributes which will actually override those initial issues. So I hope that answers your question. We have to continue to address all issues. There's no taboos here, and there's no way we're not going to step on toes and offend people. People will be offended by anything. There's nothing that we can do that will not engage offense. And we just have to be honest, and that's really what it comes down to. I'm not going to sit there and humor people because I want to get them on my side. I'm going to do my best to be strategic and communicative, but at the foremost, I want to be as honest as possible. So, and as far as joining forces with groups against the New World Order or what have you, I'm into joining forces with anybody that supports this direction. There are plenty of people out there on the forefront of supposedly fighting totalitarianism and fighting tyranny and all of this that openly reject what we're doing. They give it names like communism. They give it names that have a bias and an instant shut-off of new information. They're not interested in conversation. So anyone that's not interested and calls us Satanists and calls us communists, I'm not that inspired to go and approach them and try to clarify them. There are billions of people on this planet, many other groups that are much more productive and much more progressive than these supposed anti-New World Order people. And please understand that a great majority of the New World Order interests that exist now are absolutely superstitious. The New World Order in its original form, as of many, many decades ago, was essentially a trade-based totalitarianist world state operated by banks and corporations. That's a general summary of what this institution really is an advocacy for. The institution, as people portray it today, is much more ridiculous. And I'm not even going to name names of the people that obsess and harp about this in an absolutely superstitious manner. So if all you can do, people out there that buy this New World Order stuff, if all you can do is sit back and worry about eugenics and worry about world government in some abstraction, then you're missing some huge things. You're missing some massive, massive things that need to be addressed. Ignore the religious fantasy about the New World Order. It's pointless. It doesn't do anything. Number 10. What do you think about the concept of a gift economy and what Chris Anderson has to say about it? Even though there exists this hold on money from his point of view, don't you think gradually, slowly, people will grasp the reality that more and more things can be free? I like Chris Anderson's statement about that. I had seen that before, and the gift economy, of course, is an interesting idea. For those of you that don't know, Chris Anderson had talked about the reality that energy could become so abundant and digital media could become so abundant that it's easily wasteful. And what he means by that is there's no reason to charge money for it. And actually, this is the basic foundation of what we're talking about in a resource-based economy in creating an abundance. To give a quick example, and I think I've made this point before, there's no reason why anybody should be paying any money for music, for DVDs, or for literature, because all of them can be digitized right now and put into central databases that the whole world can access in extreme high quality. Someone might have romantic inhibitions about looking at a digital book as opposed to the sentimental notion of flipping pages. Well, that's a different point. Nevertheless, this can be done now. So I believe that in time, if the thing is that the establishment has to make money, so there's a natural restriction of the gravitation towards free. In other words, the economic theorists that were aware of technological unemployment 50, 60 years ago were saying that we would eventually go to a shortened work week. We'd eventually go to 5 days to 4 days to 3 days, from 8-hour days to 6-hour days to 5-hour days. As technology progressed, this hasn't happened. What's happened is that the profit-based mindset has not allowed that to happen because all they see are more dollar signs. You have a person working, and you have a machine they're working with. You get more machines, you get less people, and as far as they can tell, the unemployment isn't bad enough to usurp the system yet. It will be, and that's why we talk about technological unemployment in the way that we do. But the gift economy is a great idea. I'd love to see that transition. I would love to see free energy. I'd love to see free media in the cyber world. I would love to see work cut down to multiple days a week because of the abundance of technological employment. This would be the fantasy. This would be the ideal transition. But I have to admit, and I think Jacques would agree, I'm extremely cynical about that occurring because it doesn't feed the profit system. It doesn't feed the free market system at all. It doesn't benefit those that want to maintain their social stratification. So we'll see what happens. But I agree with the gift economy on a certain level, and I think in transition these would be ideals. Sadly, I'd like to see that happen, but I just don't think it will. We'll see. Number 11. In your next movie, are you still going to be talking about the, quote, unfortunate situation we're in, unquote, in which you would fall into a, quote, frustrated point of view, unquote, which I would say would be promoting the us versus them mentality? Are we going to try and keep away from that and be forward-looking and optimistic about the possibilities? Well, yes. If you notice, the entire second half of Zeitgeist Addendum was dedicated towards positive issues and positive possibilities. In fact, that is the middle point of the entire Zeitgeist trilogy, because the new film, while will indeed talk about problems, it's not going to be talking about problems in any type of us against them mentality. It's going to talk about actual statistical problems. It's going to talk about things that no one can dispute. It isn't about us against them at this point. It's about the destruction of the environment. It's about the destruction of the human species. The planet isn't going anywhere, in the words of George Carlin. We are. We're killing ourselves. We're not injuring anything else. We're setting ourselves up for disaster on both environmental and social levels. Nuclear warheads are still very much in existence. Little things like this North Korea little issue, which, it's all for show as far as I'm concerned, but nevertheless, you never know what could be triggered. Nanotechnology, if you think nuclear weapons are bad, the positive attributes of nanotechnology, if you've looked into this, are weighed out by some extremely horrific possibilities of abuse. That would make a nuclear weapon look like a baseball bat. So these are issues that have to be addressed. But yes, I'm going to focus on positive, but you can't just focus on positive. It's not honest. You have to focus on it in a balanced perspective, and that's really what I'm going to try and do. I'm definitely going to be optimistic. That's the whole thing's about optimism, because we have tremendous possibilities, but people need to be aware of both. Number 12. Do you think a TV film production focusing on a resource-based economy of low production values would have much impact? Do you think for this to have the impact that it needs, it should have quite a bit of money behind it? What would be an ideal scenario? Well, money behind it would simply mean that we have more access to high-end resources to make it presentable in a way that would make it look like, say, a Hollywood production. So the general public, when they come to see it, don't see, a grassroots documentary. They don't see shaky camera angles and stuff like that, or bad animation. So, low production values can be good. I guess it's more to the effect of how well it's written. There's many variables there. But ideally, the ideal is that we get a major producer to do it. I mean, independent, through time we might be able to do an independent production of a very high quality, pulling in different animators and volunteers. But I'd really like to see it get picked up by a major distribution company, by a major director, because all the great ingredients are there. We're working on the script now. The Venus Project is. I heard a little bit of it last time I saw them. There's a lot of great progress. And once we have that, I think we can walk into a major house and sit down with a major director and show them not only the script, but Jaque's incredible visual library. Because the beauty of this is that Jaque already has the visual stimulus for it. He's got his amazing drawings and unique models, and then all they basically have to do is emulate that. So a lot of the creative problems that would spark from creating a new futuristic system aren't there. So I think that would be a great incentive for a director to jump on board. So we'll see. Number 13. What of the future of machine maintenance? With so much technology and automation involved, what of malfunction and maintenance? Should we really send or conceive of machines and automated constructs to solve every problem for us? And I'm including the far future here as well. What of machines that fix machines that fix machines? Who maintains those? More machines. Well, in an amusing answer, you're basically correct. Robotics and programming will continue to expand in ways that we can't even imagine. Artificial intelligence, machines that can self-repairing circuits, machines that have nanotechnology built into their structures where if there's a problem, it's instantly detected, and then these tiny little nanobot machines can go in and repair structures. That would be in the very distant future. What you have to remember is that machines can be created to work much longer than what we assume they can now. In society today, as I've drilled into you guys, I think, we have the need for cyclical consumption. Even the most advanced machines have an inherent aspect of flaw based on the need for the company, based on the requirement of the prior company the company that produces it, to make money off of the selling of that machine. And in the back of their mind, they hope that the company that purchased the machine will come back for repairs and come back perhaps for more machines or replacement machines. In the future, things will be designed to last. They'll be designed to work and not be bought and sold. And I think that's a dramatic shift. Titanium has a lifespan far exceeding our normal lifespan. Coupled with extremely advanced methods of production, you can create a machine that has an incredible operating lifespan that far exceeds the human lifespan, which would be fantasy to us. That's really all I can say about that without going into too much detail. And the real issue is that even when people maintain the machines, and as I mentioned, through the transition, less and less people are required, there's no basis for an economic system after a certain point. At what point will we decide that this system can no longer work? 10% unemployment, 20% unemployment, 40% unemployment, 80% unemployment? At what point do we see we have to do something different? And in a system like a resource-based economy where everything is provided for everyone with access, where every contribution is equitable to all people, where there's no vested interest at all, you'll get an entirely new breed of people that will want, and I think this is your point, that will want to help in the service and maintenance of the systems that are operated. And it won't be people in the future, it won't be people that sit there with a hammer and a screwdriver fixing things. It'll be large system overseeing large systems operations. We already see this in many advanced Japanese automotive plants, and I'm going to talk more about that in the new film. Number 14. What about Indians that want to continue to live in their natural environment without too much, without machines, etc.? Must everyone participate in the Venus Project, or is there room for other people that want to live in another direction? Yes, of course there's room. I mean, this isn't forced on people. I think in the Q&A, the FAQ on the website, if you go to that, I believe there's a Q&A post that says, will people have to live in the cities or something like that, and Jaque addresses that very thoroughly. The benefits of the society, the system, the cities will be such that it would be very rational. But, even today we have the Amish who choose to live without modern conveniences. As time evolves, I think that it will just seem illogical for people to live that way, but tradition is powerful, especially at this point in time. Religion is powerful. So, all of that stuff will be provided for. It's not like they're going to be heavy consumers. Obviously, they'll be more simplistic, so it doesn't necessarily present a problem. So, the answer is yes. People can live as they see fit, and I think you'll also see a simplified orientation of society where it isn't this massive urban sprawl that you see today. And there'll actually be a lot more nature around. There'll be a lot more nature than we see now. We'll restore the environment. We won't be cutting down trees anymore. So if there needs to be pockets of what you would call tribal people, and they live very simplistically without bothering or hurting anybody, then yes, there's no grounds for denying that, I suppose. Number 15. How will the movement be untroubled from the infiltration of the elite or mighty people that have bad interests about humanity and people? In the transition, the movement will most definitely be infiltrated. It's just going to. There's no way that the system will transform without extreme attacks, without the established orthodoxy, so to speak, getting up in arms. The religious orthodoxy will probably do the same thing. But we have to continue to educate people and get people informed. And I think over time people will overpower the establishment based on the numbers. People will see the merit. It will become very transparent, and we will be able to overcome it. I don't know what the future holds as far as problems, but I think they will not serve the type of barrier that a lot of people assume, because once society as a whole engages this and understands it, the benefits, the positive attributes become so powerful, the expectation will become so powerful that people will not be able to, the establishment will not be able to hold their ground. Even the military will not be able to hold their ground if they were used against the people. Number 16. I understand that this is supposed to be non-profit, but a bunch of broke people can't really do much in the current system. What if the current Zeitgeisters all donated, say, $10 each, and in the account and collected interest to support the movement as well? I'm not interested in doing that arbitrarily. Again, if we have a project, then that will be figured out. Project donations have a place, and they'll have transparency, and that's the way this needs to be, not just random donations. I mean, the donations you make to the Venus Project, I think, are great. That goes to their materials. But when it comes to large-scale financial needs, the best way to do it is by having a solid project to work towards, and people know where their money is going. Otherwise, you're going to get animosity, and you could even get corruption on multiple levels. Number 17. Another member and I have been seriously discussing starting a website for a chapter in our area. I know that you provide website templates for aspiring chapters. I want to create a chapter using my preferred content management system in my own code. What are your thoughts on this? That's absolutely fine. As far as the state chapters, which we're setting up, I'd have to you'll have to contact our admins about that once we get it set up. If you want to set up an independent site and you pay for it, then it's as long as it resembles our site in some form of style and the content's there's no objection for that objection. We're just trying to make it simplistic and somewhat centralized so the information can transfer fairly easily. I think that's fine. There's no reason why you can't do that. Number 18. In the last radio address, you said we don't need a government. Does this go along with saying that a child does not need one or more parental figures for guidance? There's a big difference between a child learning and needing guidance and a government that oversees the operations with its own self-interest of society. I find it difficult to find the comparison, but I do understand what you're saying. Children need education and they need positive reinforcement, both for personal and social actions. Government, on the other hand, as it exists today, is a massive financial bureaucracy. It's a business more than anything else with heavy lobbying, heavy self-interest, vested interest. In government, as we know, we don't need it because the only thing we need is resource oversight and production and distribution management. That's all any type of system could be. I hope everyone understands that. While that's an oversimplification in transition, obviously there could be other social problems that have to be dealt with that might need some type of organization to help with. In the most abstract sense, all we need are the goods and services that enable us to live a healthy and productive and peaceful life where there's no conflict, where people get along, people work together, they inspire each other, they inspire the system, and we continue to be emergent and evolve. And to do that, you just need technical insight, education, resource management, and availability of the resources and goods necessary to make that happen. Availability of the best food imaginable, of the cleanest water. And that's really all government needs to be. It doesn't need to be this massive, ridiculous thing that we see now, engaged in war for its own vested self-interest. The war pattern is not the war pattern is a natural byproduct because of the scarcity that's inherent. You'll find that it's basically a massive battle in government today because of all the vested interest. And I say war in the sense of not just war between countries, but war in the sense of war between vested interests. Even voting, as I mentioned in the last broadcast, is in a way a war of vested interest in a certain abstraction. So once that's eliminated, then you'll see an entirely different structure emerge. That's why we don't use the term government, because it has an automatic definition. We don't need governance, we need maintenance. We need maintenance and oversight. We need systems operations, a systems approach to society in the most holistic fashion we can create, because that's the most efficient. Number 19, is it time for new ways to support the movement besides just the movies? That's up to you. You need to get out there and get events going and do what you can. I'm making movies. Everyone else should do what they can with events, lecture circuits. In time, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to try and get more of that happening. Events are really the biggest issue, and of course making media for the internet, writing articles, doing anything. Engaging those that are very cynical of it. Don't waste your time on those that are in, they're just out there saying weird fringe things about the movement. Focus those in the economic circles that don't quite get it, and if you can sharpen your skills at dealing with the economists, you can basically do anything. Number 20. When the transition to the resource-based economy begins, what will be done with all of the garbage we have accumulated over the years, such as old cars and the millions of old houses, etc.? Well, if the systems were applied correctly, if the processes were applied correctly, we could recycle so much than we do now. There really isn't that much interest in recycling in our current system because it really isn't financially rewarded. So once the financial element's gone, and once we have people that see the value of recycling, see the necessity of recycling, I think all of the waste of our current system could be put to good use eventually. In a more advanced stage, you'll have nano disassemblers, where a certain object can be placed in a certain area where disassemblers are programmed to disassemble something molecularly. This can be done with with problematic materials that have extremely long decomposition rates. So that's way down the line. Those don't exist yet, but they exist in the human body, but they don't exist in we can't create them yet. But nanotechnology has been talking about that for about a decade. So these are other possibilities. I'm not really worried about that. I think if the initiative was there to overcome the pollution, we can figure it out. There's even bacteria that's been engineered that could clean up oil spills. Number 21. Isn't it more likely that technological unemployment will lead to fewer hours per day than a collapsed labor system? I just addressed that in a prior question. I think, is it more likely? That's the debate. I'm not sure. I'd love to see that. I would, but I don't know if the system will support that. I don't know if the profit system will enable that or allow that. Considering the mass unemployment that we see already, you'd have to have a major financial shift in the approach of the corporations, and I just don't think they're willing to do that. The reward isn't there for them to do it because they don't think sociologically. They're not thinking that broadly. Excuse me. Number 22. Will all information be available to any person, meaning full transparency of all information contained by all computers to all people of the world? Well, privacy, I think, in the transition will always be an issue, but as far as so-called governmental meetings, as far as meetings of interdisciplinary teams and anything related to the social operation of society should be absolutely transparent. There'll be no tolerance for these Council on Foreign Relations, Bilderberg Trilateral Commission groups. No one that has any stake in production methods should be meeting behind closed doors at any time. This will be one of the main issues. We can't allow that type of secrecy. That type of secrecy has a reason. Anytime you see private meetings between anything, it's a collusion and it's basically a corruption inherently, especially with those organizations that have strong relationships to society's functionality. Number 23. How do our tenets and proposals address evolutionary, environmental, and biologically natural existing scarcities? Well, there's always going to be limitations on the planet. There's always going to be, there's always going to be natural limitations on the planet. Perhaps, for example, land is a good example. There's only so much land, though it would not surprise me that we could create land masses in the ocean eventually. It would not surprise me that we could shoot a rocket into the atmosphere and blow out through nanotechnology another spherical structure that can be terraformed very easily and basically recreate planets that we can live on. All of these possibilities are there. There's plenty of things that can be done. The universe is the final frontier. Space is the final frontier. We live in a massive, massive universe. I know it sounds science fiction to talk about things like that, but I would not be surprised in our generation if we begin to see extremely large space stations be created that resemble, states. This is not out of the realm of possibility. As far as other aspects of natural scarcity, you have to be more specific. There's always limits on some level, but we can overcome those limitations that create conflicts, and that's the real issue. People will have to understand the environment. They have to understand, again, the current carrying capacity of the Earth and how that carrying capacity is enlarged by technology, things like this. Number 24. Evolutionary theorists have begun to regard sexual selection as a primary contribution to evolution. Of our superior intellect and implementation of tools, technology, and each to the development of complex language, this theory suggests that social stratification can develop out of the scarcity of more or less beautiful sex partners. Regarding the use of positive social conditioning to address this, the theory suggests that tendencies towards what is beautiful is universal among our species. The universal judgment of what is beautiful stems directly from a comparative point of view and therefore could never be satisfied by abundance. It is essentially human rarity. What are your thoughts? Well, I don't see any evidence that denotes that there is a universal beauty implication, if I understand you correctly. There have been studies done that would say things like, well, men like women with large curves in their thighs because they're childbearing, or in other logics like this, or women like men that are extremely big and large and built because they have a higher they have a higher possibility of descent or of being better genes for reproduction. There's a book by Robert Sapolsky that I was reading. I don't have it on hand, but he gives an example of his baboon troop that he studied, and he talked about beauty and how it related to the baboon troop, and he had some interesting examples about how it really wasn't clear-cut at all. You'd have these big alpha males that would typically, based on this argument, be the ones that attract the most females, and while that holds true in certain circles, it did not hold true at all in other circles. In fact, many of the females would reject the most dominant, and they would go for the smaller, more feeble, but yet much nicer males. So the idea of beauty being some kind of fixed issue has long been debated, and I frankly think it's almost exclusively culturally based. It's almost exclusively a cultural phenomenon, and the scarcity that exists is a cultural scarcity that's been imposed. And I think that holds true. If you go to African tribes that have like women with the massive discs in their lips, or voluptuousness that you don't find attractive, most don't find attractive in the Western society, all sorts of strange status issues that relate to vanity. Again, why do they behave in this manner? Why are they attracting the most males or the most females, depending on what they're doing? Women that extend their necks and social status. It's interesting. It's very interesting. I have to say it's absolutely subjective, and it's absolutely imposed by culture. So I hope that answers your thoughts. I don't believe there's any kind of universal issue there. It's all based on culture. And once we move out of the obsessive vanity that we currently see in our system, I think you'll see an entirely new culture emerge that doesn't just look at tits and ass when walking down the street. That doesn't have that perpetuation that we see over and over and over again in all media. It's fascinating. I see women in the subway looking at vanity magazines of other women dressed up, and it blows my mind. It just blows my mind. The vanity is unfounded, and it's just incredible. I could talk about that a lot. I find it amazing. It goes to show that people can be basically conditioned to believe just about anything. Number 25. Many people have problems with learning. Some learn independently, but most need assistance, and especially human assistance. This produces human scarcity again. For example, Jacques Fresco, everyone would like to meet him personally, but there's no physical possibility for this because there's no time. Well, again, this is one of the natural limits of our physical reality. But Jacques Fresco can make videos. He can get his word out there. He can have webcasts that millions of people can watch. Human scarcity, well, obviously we're all individual and hence we're all scarce, but I don't think that has any ramifications to the broader issues at hand when it comes to what causes conflict in society and what can create an abundance of necessity, and the abundance of necessity which will resolve all sorts of issues that we have problems with today, which generate war and social stratification, all the real issues. I don't think this is, it's an interesting point, but it's not really a real issue. Number 26. Do you think the establishment will go to great lengths to keep this system going, like reforming it or changing it in some way that it will drag on for much longer? If so, do you know how they will do it? I think I addressed this earlier. The length the establishment will go will be to deem the thing, the media will deem it in some kind of, typical communist fashion, socialist fashion, and then the religious community might come out and deem it in some other capacity. The technological and capitalist community will come out and probably create things too. If you look at the history of science and technology and traditional rhetoric, almost every new idea is met by opposition by almost all sides. I have a great book called Medical Apartheid, which is about how the medical establishment in the late 19th, earliest 20th century were rampant with all of these highly prestigious PhDs that felt that the black community were of a Darwinistic lower race, and they would use all these examples that would say that, if black people were not slaves or kept segregated, they would go insane, and they would try to back this up by actual clinical studies. They would show photographs of like monkeys, and then they would show facial structures of black people. It was unbelievable. Unbelievable. It was actually in the early 20th century. There was actually in 1910. There was actually an indigenous black man, a widow, who was brought from his tribe and put on display in the Bronx Zoo next to other jungle animals. I mean, my point being is that you have to have a lot of cynicism towards the establishment and so-called experts, and you have to really think carefully. And that's why people say, well, why aren't there more scientists behind this movement, behind the Venus Project? Well, Why aren't there more? Where were the people that agreed with all of Da Vinci's ideas, or Newton's ideas, or Galileo's ideas? There's always comes from an isolated perspective, and I hope people can relate to that. So when people attack us, it's going to be very, very, very obvious. It's going to be very obvious the disposition. They will have supposed science to back it up. You just have to be able to keep an objective mind and don't be too intimidated by it, and keep pushing forward and keep educating yourself and learning as much as you possibly can. But the establishment will do whatever they can, but they're not going to be able to survive, because nothing is in favor of them except their own self-perpetuation. Everything of this natural emergence that we're going through will override the establishment one way or another. It might lead to some seriously catastrophic events, but nevertheless, I have complete confidence that this transition will occur. It has to. Number 27, listen to your radio address. It seems like you were saying that fantasy novels are harmful to children and that they should instead be taught what is real. It also seems that you didn't agree with that fantasy could help a child explore their creativity. In my experience, sci-fi fantasy novels tend to encourage the child to question what they are. We should also remember that much of our science today and what we are planning was considered fanciful waste of time initially. Well, I think you kind of misunderstood what we were talking about. It's a big difference between giving someone a creative idea, such as science fiction, and creative forms of thought. I used to like early Kurt Vonnegut novels because they were very thought-inspiring. They were fanciful, but they were very interesting, and he had a lot of unique science that was kind of blown out of proportion, but still inspired creative thought and imagination. Imagination is very, very important to inspire a child, but it's a big difference from Santa Claus, from a mouse turning into a pumpkin carriage, or Walt Disney. It's a very big difference from nonsensical fantasies, Easter bunnies. This is the type of thing that has no creative function whatsoever. So I think that's really the best way to describe it. It's a spectrum. Number 28, who would protect children against problems such as uncaring or deadbeat parents and child molestation? Who would control complex decisions like child adoptions without any sort of state or government above? Well, it's not really the correct question. In the transition, there will need to be institutions as they exist today to handle all sorts of problems like that. My mother was in social services for years, and I got to see firsthand the incredible degenerative acts of certain families, generations upon generations of child abuse, of molestation abuse, all sorts of incest issues. And it basically a lot of it comes from all sorts of environmental aberrancies, but it really comes down to the system, and I think that's the first question you have to ask. So we're going to reduce those issues substantially, hopefully to a point where they're not even relevant. And, in a community that someone wants to have an adoption, it wouldn't be set up like some, CPS type thing. It could be a normal service like anything else in society. Again, in transition, you'll have to have so-called watchdog groups to care for humanity. Of course, that leads to corruption on a certain level. I mean, if you have a family that has a kid, they can't support it, and they beat it, and they don't feed it, well, someone has to step in and do something. Obviously, that's the community family doing something. But it's always a gray area there. But in the transition, things like that will have to occur. But our goal is to eliminate the causes of those issues, and that's really the big issue. All right, one more minute before I bring Jacque and Roxanne on. Will sports and competition fade out in a resource-based economy such as football and soccer? I know there are avid football and soccer fans conditioned by society. I think I can't imagine a world without sports. In the transition, sports will occur, but the basis of sports and the basis of competition will be reduced, where you don't battle each other to win. You battle to help yourself and to improve yourself. I think I've already given the example of someone playing tennis against a computerized system, and you come back and you play against yourself again. I think in time, as people mature and they grow out of the competitive value systems that have been perpetuated, you'll have a much more free-flowing and less aggressive mentality when it comes to competition in sports. I don't see the eradication of it per se, but I think people will grow out of that tendency, and sports will take on a very different meaning. It will take on a self-generating exercise, human interaction, but hopefully people won't look at each other as enemies and want to conquer each other and beat each other as they do today, as our society continues to perpetuate and thus reward. So let me bring on the Venus Project now. Jaque and Roxanne, are you there?
Right.
We are.
Hey, how's it going?
How are you?
Good, I'm doing well. I was just running
Great.
through some questions here. I didn't get through, as usual, I never get through all the ones I want to, but I can probably relay some of these back to you guys. I know there was a few of them that were actually addressed towards you. So before we begin, is there anything you guys want to bring up? Any news or anything specific?
Well, I prefer to really answer questions if I can.
Okay, sure. I think that's a good way to go. Here's a question from a forum member, and apparently about 2 weeks ago, you made a comment, Jaque, about philosophy, psychology, and psychiatry, and you were denoting how they had a certain degree of irrelevancy to society. And this person wanted clarification on that point. Do you know what his context?
I do recall that.
Okay.
I think that the best way I can answer that is, it seems that psychologists and psychiatrists work on the individual.
Right.
And I really believe their problems are generated by the environment, the culture they're reared in. I really believe that working on the individual is sort of ass backwards. You really have to alter the society that produces the kind of values that are aberrant, that make it difficult for people to relate to one another. I believe that is somewhat deliberate in our educational system. I go along with the concept of Einstein that said that he felt patriotism is a disease in that it separates people and it doesn't help us understand the contributions made by other nations. Our major problem, if I can tackle that now,
Sure.
is really that the difference between science and politics. In politics, and it doesn't help us understand the contributions made by other nations. Our major problem, if I can tackle that now,
Sure.
is really that the difference between science and politics. In politics, you have a lot of usually businessmen or lawyers trying to work out a system in which no research is done at all. If you get into the physical sciences, what they do is they come up with a concept of structure, and then they test that concept. They twist the structure, pull it apart, and if they're putting up a building, they precast the concrete and put it in the compression machine to see what kind of loading it can stand. If they make an airplane, they study aerodynamics, how the air flows over the wing and the body, in order to arrive at an operating system. But in politics, it's as old as time. They sit around discussing things, and they're never put to test. And so politics really can't go anywhere because it doesn't deal with anything. It deals with opinions, feelings, which are great 200 years ago. But today, we really have to work with a different system. And the system that I'm about to talk about is the procedural system of the Venus Project. In other words, instead of designing buildings and putting people in them in houses, what we design is an entire system. So the city itself is based on the carrying capacity of the environment. So is the whole project. In other words, as we bring nations together to work as a cooperative team on the earth, take care of the environment, restore the oceans, rebuild the reefs, and restructure our education so it's relevant to conditions that threaten people. Instead of killing one another as they do in wars, as politicians usually conclude, we would train people or educate people to become good at problem solving. So what we have to do is learn how to bridge the difference between nations, not kill. Killing is a very old solution. It never worked. It always produced hatred and resentment and destruction and pollution in the environment. There's just no limit to the amount of pollution if we get into another military conflict. So the military conflict is a supreme failure of nations to bridge the difference. And I feel that the only way you can do that, bridge the difference between nations, is to make them part of a global system in which all of the world's resources are shared by all the world's people. As long as you've got separate nations that control resources or the greater deal of the world's resources, you are going to have trouble. All nations want a piece of the pie, and that's your problem. The same with labor unions. Labor unions are very good for labor, but if the price that they demand goes up, the price of the car goes up. So labor unions are interested in getting a piece of the pie. I'm interested in all people getting a piece of the pie, not fighting for any group. I'm not interested in women's rights, Jewish rights, Polish rights. I think that all people should have free access to the necessities of life without servitude or debt of any kind. Anything less than that will be a continuation of the same problems we've had for centuries. In fact, that we've had the same problems for hundreds of years, and normal people are brought up to believe that that's human nature, because the conditions have always been that of scarcity, deprivation, and artificiality. One of the major forms of artificiality would be the concept of a free society or democratic society. You've never had a democratic society. In a truly democratic society, you would hear all points of view on Sunday, all concepts of religion, different concepts, different presentations, including atheism, agnosticism, and it would be up to the American people to turn it off. But when you've got one point of view on the air, every broadcasting company, remember, has vested interest. They depend on funding for advertising, and they sell corporate interest. So how are they going to be objective? You have military people on the air and all the major broadcasting companies talking about the war. You don't have sociologists, social scientists, social psychologists giving their point of view. Of course you don't realize what's missing, because you've never heard the truth. The truth is that we've never had democracy. In a democratic society, all children will be given the best of education without a price tag. In a democratic society, all children would have access to nutritious food. In a truly democratic society, you would hear all points of view. Just as if a person accuses you of something, you have the right to face your accuser in court. When our president talks against another nation, you said you should invite the prime minister of that nation to give his point of view. We don't have to agree with it. Then we should invite the prime minister of Sweden, who says they're both wrong. This is how I see it. That would be a democratic society. Every point of view on the air. You've never had that, and you will not have that as long as you stress the free enterprise or the monetary system. Any conversations other than that which supports the monetary system would be a threat to this system. Even the army is artificial. Even the war is artificial. Most wars are not about bringing democracy to other nations. It's about resources. It's about oil, or it's about cheap labor, or it's nothing to do with democracy. In fact, if you really think about it, you find that you can't go to a country where people have an established system, whatever that is, where they have 10 wives or 15 wives. You can't verbally change them. They've been that way for hundreds of years. So the only way to bridge the difference between nations is not through military systems. It's by sharing that which we have in common. All nations need clean air, clean water, arable land, good nutrition, and a relevant education. So you start with the areas we have in common. Eventually, all people will pick up technology because it's the only thing that can add to their culture and minimize the amount of stress and give us more time to spend with our families. Through technology, through machines, we can do away with repetitive, boring jobs, which most people hate. And in that way, we can send people back to school to study things that become relevant to problem solving. Imagine if all the soldiers, instead of trained to be killing machines, they were trained to be problem solvers. What a wonderful world we could have. When you think of all the money nations spend on military and defense systems, which are of no use at all, produce nothing valuable for people. They say, well, it advances electronics. That's not true. We don't put up appropriations to advance electronics. Why don't we do that? Because it's not good business. In military systems, you have to update all the equipment, all the airplanes, all the submarines, all the battleships have to be updated. So there's a hell of a lot of money in war. If war were real, they would never conscript the lives of young men to serve their country. They would conscript all the war industries for the duration of the war and then give it back to industry after the war. Just like a soldier puts up his life for this country, no one should make profit out of war. I mean selling machine guns, submarines, aircraft, all that is big business. And as long as that exists, the war is ultimately corrupt.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. Very well stated. Thank you for that. One of the things that I wanted to bring up to you, I've been learning a lot about advanced technologies and cybernation and nanotechnology. And one thing I've realized is that when it comes to war, these things can be used against us. They can be used in ways that are extremely negative. It's almost as though we have a race against time before the war industry begins to use cybernated machines, begins to use self-replicating machines for its own means. Do you feel that's a real threat?
The real threat is ignorance.
Sure.
A public that's not informed or well-educated is a threat. And that goes for all the nations. All the nations of the world try to bring up their people to uphold established institutions. But if you work today for an electronics firm, they don't want you to turn out the same product. They want you to make your product faster. I'm talking about laptops that store more information in less space, lighter in weight. All technology is in the constant state of rapid change, whereas our political systems, they keep pounding into your head democracy and freedom. That means no change. If you have a fixed concept of society, it means you're on the way out. The nation that has no vision of what the future can be is bound to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. And if we fail to grasp the significance of organized science working for the benefit of all the world's people, not for some private institution, once you realize that, you will see great advances made in society. Just imagine how foolish we are. We try to dig up nickels and dimes for research in heart disease or care packages for people injured in earthquakes. But when war comes, we produce everything, all kinds of killing machines without any worry about cost or price. Don't you see how corrupt that is? How obviously corrupt that is? Why don't we build better universities? Why don't we teach people how to relate to one another, update our language so there's no argument in it? You know, the Bible, people read the Bible, but the language written in the Bible is subject to interpretation. A person reads it and says, I think Jesus meant this, and another person disagrees. So you got a divided kind of religion. The Seventh-day Adventists, the Catholics, the Protestants, all these groups. A divided church is no church at all. Because don't you see, as long as your language is subject to interpretation, there's no basis for communicating. Now, there is a language, or many languages, that are not subject to interpretation. Chemistry, mathematics, physics, structural engineering. When engineers talk to each other, they don't talk in terms, that's a nice bridge. They give the tensile strength, the compression strength, the torsional strength of metals, the composition of metals. So the language of science appears to be universal. When we send the blueprint to China or Japan, they don't turn out what they think you mean. The blueprint has all specifications on it. The tolerances, the kind of parts, the metallurgy, everything related to the product. So obviously, if there is a language that's not subject to interpretation, as long as we don't use that language, we're going to have trouble. That's why law as a field or profession works, because they can take language and turn it around, do whatever they want to do with it. In the future, the honored professions of today would be considered criminal. Lawyers would be considered criminals. Judges would be considered criminals. Or you got people that you admire, like King Solomon had 1,000 wives. He'd be arrested today as a bigamist. So whatever you hold up as a criminal doesn't make sense. Investment banking is criminal. The banking institutions are socially offensive and criminal. All private institutions are criminal. Privatizing industry is criminal. Privatizing schools would be criminal. The public domain is the most important thing. How well educated people are, how healthy they are, how rich their lives are, and this is what the Venus Project concerns itself with. The well-being of all the world's people.
That's fantastic. I think that's the most important point to get across. That's for sure. There have been a lot of people speaking about the transition and getting problems from the establishment. In Zeitgeist Addendum, you mentioned how they're not going to give up the monetary system. The monetary system must fail. What kind of problems do you see arising in the course of this transition, and can you be specific with it?
Yes, a rapid rate in crime, uprisings of minorities, and then police putting in, or lawyers or government people putting in new laws, such as certain people have to be in the house by 9 o'clock. They're not supposed to be walking around at night. They're going to try to manage the disruptions caused by the free enterprise system. By the way, if you're not aware of this, the money that was given to banks are the same people that created the problem. So it means they really do control the country. You think you got a new administration in there. That's only an illusion, just like democracy is an illusion. It's always an illusion if people don't have access to nutritious food, if they can't afford it. If they can't afford medical care, then the word democracy has no meaning at all. Think about those things. In other words, I'm not out to hurt anybody or kill anybody. I'm just talking about all civilizations go through transitions. They're always emerging. And the concept of the transition means, as we learn new things, in technology, we apply it. We apply it militaristically. It is unfortunate that any single nation goes out into space, because I can assure you it's only a matter of time that nuclear weapons will be moving around out there, or stationary, orbiting the Earth, ready to drop on any nation that doesn't behave in the way we consider correct. So we're not sane enough nor wise enough yet to use our technology for the benefit of all the world's people. You know, we don't have the wisdom. We are good technically. We know electronics. We know how to construct tall buildings, but we haven't learned how to share life experiences. We haven't learned how to find meaning in our own life, how to relate to one another in a meaningful way, and what love really means. We haven't learned that. We are not civilized yet. And this whole notion of a quest for intelligent life in outer space, we don't even have intelligent life on Earth yet. And would you know intelligent life if you saw it? I don't think anyone would know what to look for. There are people that call themselves truth seekers. And in order to seek the truth, you'd have to know everything. So how can you be a truth seeker if you're brought up in a given culture with a set of values that you think are appropriate or that your society try to tell you is the greatest in the world, the greatest country in the world? God bless America. Who the hell are you to tell God who to bless? If God made everybody, you have no business destroying any other country.
Great points, absolutely. One thing that came up in my research recently, I think someone asked a question earlier about this, is about 60 years ago, those that were aware of technological unemployment used to talk about how we would begin to reduce the work week and the hours that people work during the day. Do you think this will happen?
Why should they do that?
Right.
In other words, there are engineers called time and motion studies. They get more motion and less time out of people. It's very good for industry, but not good for the working man. The stress levels are higher. Marines, when they're being trained, they sing songs which are already prepared called Blood Makes the Grass Grow. They sing while they're marching so they won't be thinking of other things. It's a hell of a technique for mind control. Military people really believe, I'm talking about people in the Pentagon, they really believe they're there to defend the country. The way you defend the country is by designing out problems. The way you defend the country is by bridging the difference between nations, by cutting back on armament, by restoring the oceans and the reefs, and cleaning the air, and restoring nature to as near a natural condition as possible. This is true national defense, not military systems. I wish I could address the Pentagon. I think the guys in it are sincere, but I think they're distorted by the culture they live in. They think they're doing a public service. You know, if we have another war, or if you don't understand this, America has 300 submarines. Each one has more destructive power than all the wars in history. Now, what can you accomplish with that? Tell me. I'd like to know.
I completely agree with you.
There's another thing. They have built a special place for senators and congressmen. It's under a mountain, and it has food for 6 months. Refrigeration, lights, electric generators. What do you come out to after 6 months? A radioactive planet? How stupid can you be? In other words, I'm trying to tell you that there's limitless dimensions to human stupidity if they're not well informed. They will drive themselves into the ground, destroy the environment, the atmosphere. We are not sane enough yet to use technology wisely. I hope that you ask negative questions if you can. See if you can find anything wrong or weak about the Venus Project. I'd certainly like to hear it, and I certainly would like to have a chance to answer questions that you've never had answered. Thank you.
Sure. Well, the questions are always submitted to me through the forum, and I will definitely get them to submit ones directly to you in the most challenging manner. One thing I thought was great last I spoke with you, you mentioned the idea of security and the fallacy of security. Would you comment on this obsession that our current culture has with security?
Yeah, security is as long as there's no tornadoes to rip your house apart in 20 minutes. As long as the banks don't fail again, and so everything you work for is gone, even though you want to send your kids to college, the threat of unemployment threatens that, even though you'd like to send your kids to college. So you live in a system, a very predatory system, where people make a buck of human misery. In other words, if somebody bangs in your car, somebody makes money straightening out the fenders. If you need a root canal job, you might have to pay over $1,000 to have it done. And if you get medically very ill, cancer, it'll wipe out all your savings. So the whole notion of security is really an illusion put out there to keep you going. You people have been deprived of the real meaning of education. And that is learning how to live, learning how to find meaning in your own life, learning how to pursue the things you are interested in instead of the best years of your life working for a corporation. The minute you punch your time clock to go into any American industry, you're walking into a dictatorship. They tell you, well, you don't want to live in a dictatorship. What do you think you're living in? If you don't show up on time, you lose your job. If you don't work 8 hours a day and do your job, you're discharged. You don't participate. But they tell you you live in a participatory democracy. How many of you out there voted for the Vietnam War? How many of you voted for the space program? How many of you voted for the highways and bridge designs? You don't participate at all. That's an illusion. Bridge engineers do bridges. People that study tunnels and transportation work on those problems. Aircraft are designed by aircraft companies, not the public. Where do you participate? You think you elect people to political office? That's an illusion. The people you vote for are selected by the establishment. And if they don't carry out the game of the establishment, they are soon removed or assassinated. Think about it.
Yes, indeed. And those patterns are constant across the world. To change gears a little bit, I wanted to ask a question from a forum member in regard to distribution methods that might be utilized. And we've touched upon this, but could you briefly explain how distribution methods will work?
Yes, because the proof of the work is when we go to war, we have millions of people in the Army all over the world, and we distribute food, clothing to all of them without a problem.
Good point.
Except a lot of ships are sunk at sea on the way, but we still can produce enough food to feed all the millions of men in the Army. Why can't we do that in peace? Why can't we build hospitals for the poor? Why can't we take care of the earth's problems? Don't you see that the smarter the children are today, the richer the world of tomorrow? Every child deprived of nutritious food, every child hanging out in malls. That's where you find high school kids today. They hang out in malls because there's no art centers, no music centers, no cultural centers they can afford to go to. So I would say the higher the quality of the intelligence of all people, the richer the world. Deprivation spreads, and it deprives us of true progressive knowledge.
Yes, absolutely. Here's an interesting question. A lot of people, they wonder, they are so conditioned by this current culture that they have no idea what the world would even be like after the transition. And the question is, what would the problems be after we transition into the Venus Project?
The new language it has reference. For example, let me tell you how terrible our language is today.
Okay.
We say things like, have a nice weekend. Why don't you say, have a nice life? Go all the way.
Right.
You understand? We say, have a nice vacation. Have a nice life. Go all the way. In other words, our churches even bless our war tanks. This is all anti-Christ. Right. Most of the churches today, not all of them, have become business institutions. They always need money for Jesus, or God needs money. God doesn't need any money. This is a human concept. Humans invent that to take care of their own establishment. Now, Jesus, as I understood the man, he would have dinner with the poor, he would work with the poor, with the prostitute, with the beggars, and if people tried to stone another person, they would say, he who is without sin, let him cast the first stone. The nation that is completely free of corruption does not exist. We stole this land from the Indians. We took California and New Mexico by force and violence. Definition of a criminal: one who removes an object from your possession without your permission. That's exactly what we did after we won the war. We kidnapped the German engineers and took their rockets and took whatever we needed from them and brought it here to the United States and put some of the top German engineers in charge of the rocket programs. So when you get mad at somebody and you want to kill them, You don't do that because that's against the law. But when a nation gets mad at another nation, there's mass killing, more than would have been if you were shoot your neighbor if you disagreed with them. The nations themselves are the biggest killing machines that ever existed. Although they quote the Bible, they go to church, but once the nation says, there's your enemy out there, the church itself, if it begins to say, just a minute, don't kill, don't go to war, there are other ways, that church would be shut down. Any church that would carry out true religious teachings would have a very limited following.
Absolutely. They have to survive in the monetary system just like every other group, and it's obviously very transparent to most people that establishment is extremely manipulated and is no different than really a corporation at this point.
Peter, everything that the establishment touches becomes corrupt.
Right.
When a doctor says, I think your kidney has to come out, we don't know if he's not trying to pay off a new boat he bought or a new house he bought. It's very hard in the monetary system to understand the intentions of people.
Yes.
You know, like, that's just the car you're looking for. In other words, take an honest Christian who works in a department store, and a woman, say, wants to buy a lamp for $20. If he's honest, he says, look, if you go next door, you can get the same lamp for $15. How long do you think he'd be working for that company? You see, it's very difficult in this system to be decent and fair.
Yeah, so I
Or
absolutely...
any monetary system. It just does not promote those conditions by the nature of the established society.
Yes, yes. And it's amazing how people seem surprised when we have corrupt politicians taking bribes, and they seem surprised when we go to war for resources, and it becomes quite transparent. And there's a great deal of naivety, I think, out there, wouldn't you say, with the general population, because they really believe, most of them, in this
You can't manipulate people unless they're naive.
Right, right.
Remember when in the days of slavery, if you taught your slave how to read, you were fined. You see, if you educate people, you can't control them.
Yes, yes.
So there's the answer. If those of you that don't understand what I'm talking about, if you contact the Venus Project, we have many books that you can get hold of that describe how this system works, which is not in all your public libraries. It is not in your schools. It is not in your universities. I can name a whole batch of books that you never heard of that really describe the way our country operates.
Yes, yes. And I recommend the reading list to everybody, and they should definitely get your books. And yes, absolutely. Also, I recommend people to get books and put them in libraries. People have been putting my movies in libraries, school libraries. I think it would be great to donate, have your books donated to local libraries, too. So
that would be wonderful.
Yes.
Actually, the reading list is on our blog, and you can get direct links right to Amazon to purchase them.
Right, right. Well, that's great. I think that information in your book is wonderful. That's definitely a great starting point for people to learn about this stuff. I want to rephrase my prior question. You had mentioned before that the only real threats to humanity are threats that are common to all people.
That's disease, heart disease, cystic fibrosis, degeneration of the retina, tsunamis, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods. This is what we should be working on. The threat to mankind, not other nations, not killing people, but preservation of the environment, restoring it, rebuilding the reefs, removing the pollution that we dumped into the ocean. All ships pump their bilge, oil out into the ocean, and lots of garbage and waste. We depend on the ocean for survival. We are really killing ourselves due to the fact that the public is not educated in the real essence that supports survival for all people.
That's a major threat. Irrelevant education.
Yes, I think you also mentioned that one of the greatest resources on this planet is really the human mind, and that's something people don't think about. They don't realize that the human mind is really the most powerful aspect, and we've been abusing that. We don't take care of our culture.
Right. Well, look, whenever they turned to science and said we need an atom bomb, they were able to come up with it. Too bad they weren't wise enough not to give it to the military. They would not use it intelligently. See, even the scientists today, lots of them are patriotic. Same with Germany. When Hitler got into power, many scientists fell in line. Very few actually left. So you see, even in the Axis power, scientists are brought up with loyalty to their particular country. A real scientist would have loyalty to the earth and our resources and all the people on it, not any single nation, because we owe so much to so many other countries. Like an Arab named Algebra gave us algebra, and a Frenchman named Louis Pasteur. Maybe if it weren't Pasteur, we'd all be dead. So how can you uphold any single country when the contributions that made us great in whatever way we are great comes from all over the world? The ideas come from all over the world. The printing press, Germany. This isn't an American invention. The Chinese had a kind of a rudimentary form of motion picture 600 years ago to 1,000 years ago. So you think that everything you use is American. You're not given the truth. And the book called The New American History, which is very difficult to get hold of, gives you a lot of information along the lines I'm talking about. So as long as you keep people from knowing what you call the truth, you can control them. All societies are controlled. I'm not upholding any particular society. They're all corrupt as long as they use money, as long as they have politics. With politicians never gave us a better electric light or a method of inoculation to cut down the amount of diseases in the country. They never designed hospitals for people. They made no contributions at all except verbal things. It's like religion. They give lip service to the Christ principles, and I think Christ said, by their work you shall know them. So here we go into a building and say, may we live in peace. May we have eternal brotherhood. But if you don't do anything about it, you just have a verbal hobby, which I call most established religions are a verbal hobby and have nothing to do with the teachings of the wisest people that ever lived.
Absolutely. Applied spirituality, I think, would be a good term. And unfortunately, most in our, pseudo-spiritual and
I like the term you use, applied spirituality.
That's good.
Yes, yeah, I think that's a great way to think about it. That's certainly what I try to use as a form of terminology. Because you're absolutely right. It's amazing to me how we favor certain individuals that, of course, are very giving, like Mother Teresa, but yet we don't pay attention to Louis Pasteurs and the people that have actually contributed to save millions and millions of lives. So
they also say, what would motivate people if you take away money? Well, I don't trust people motivated by money. Gandhi worked for nothing. Martin Luther King worked for nothing. And people that really love the world, Jesus never got paid for what he did. He chased the money chasers out of the temple. And when he did, he used profanity. He didn't say, will you kindly leave? He chased them out, upset their tables, and now they're all back in full control. I guess it's hard for you to see that since you're part of it. But really, if you understand what I'm talking about, we don't want to hurt anybody, kill anybody, build any prisons, or use police. We want to make it unnecessary for people to steal, so they have access to medical care, health care, decent housing, all people, all over the world. As long as you don't share your resources, you're going to have trouble.
As long as you maintain ownership, too, there'll be problems and laws to keep people who own things in power.
And if you really are honest about your religious beliefs, in the Lord's Prayer, Jesus said, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. There's no money in heaven, no business, no private ownership. What do you think we're talking about? What do you think the Venus Project is? It's a translation of all the world's religions into a way of life rather than lip service.
Absolutely, and that is precisely what I hope people get out of this that are religiously oriented, is that while they might have disputes on specifics, until you engage a world where people actually have reciprocal caring for one another and they share what they have, it's all, again, lip service, and I completely agree with you. I wanted to ask you, I got a question regarding cultural diversity. There's many people that believe that humans might be too similar, or everything might look the same in sort of like a 1984 type of environment. What can you say about cultural diversity in the future?
Well, we would have courses in creative thinking. We have courses in art and music, and creativity will be the keynote of the future, giving people the methods and means for becoming creative. I think everybody is really creative, but not given the opportunity to become so. Children always ask great questions, and we destroy their inquiry when they're very young. They say things, well, why do people live in those old broken houses, Daddy? And Daddy says, well, that's the way the world is. And they kill incentive in children. Children ask very good questions, and so in the future, no one will be in charge of a fixed point of view, or we will always be emerging into new dimensions of thinking the broadest range possible. We will encourage all people to become creative in the arts and sciences. This is the keynote of the Venus Project, creativity.
And also you have to remember that it's not what people wear or their clothing or their hairdos or the way they dance that makes them individuals. It's how you think and how creative one is. I always say to people when they ask that, well, do you think Jaque is creative or an individual? He's the most individual and creative person I know. He wouldn't come up with a society that would squelch that for everyone else.
Of course, and he's not wearing earrings, and he doesn't have tattoos. And that is unfortunately the vanity that we see in this culture, which just keeps growing every single year. And people have been brainwashed by the corporate industry to identify themselves with their property and the way they look. And I think that's a big hurdle, of course. And so
all news is managed news.
Sure.
You get what they want you to hear. You really don't have news on your broadcasting or your newspapers. Who gives a damn if somebody's getting a divorce, a movie star, or she becomes pregnant because she's not married? Who gives a damn about those things? That's irrelevant. It's a sick society that supports that. That belongs in a psychological journal, not in the newspapers.
That's a fantastic point. I couldn't agree more. I had a technical question. Somebody wanted some clarification on the carrying capacity of the Earth as it relates to technology, and what they're asking is, does the carrying capacity increase as technology advances?
I didn't quite understand that.
Does
Well,
the
essentially,
carrying capacity increase as technology advances?
Well, the carrying capacity of the Earth is fixed, but the ability of technology to solve problems and generate substitute materials that we're running out of. In other words, if we run out of certain kinds of materials, science usually is capable of coming up with a substitute. Just as we blockaded Germany from getting rubber from Sumatra, the Germans invented a synthetic rubber. So they had their jeeps and vehicles all equipped with rubber. If you have a good technical staff, you can solve problems. But technical staffs don't always have the necessary appropriations to do the research they want to do. Remember that labs today do not have the appropriations necessary to do the kind of research they want to do. In the Venus Project, we would make all things available. Whatever they required, we would make available.
And there wouldn't be patents or proprietary technology which holds creativity and advancement back.
But all inventors and all people would be cared for, so they need not be hungry anymore. Artists need not starve and paint pictures. All of that garbage that goes along with the monetary system. Someday, children will ask their parents, couldn't you see that the monetary system generated both incentives and corruption and embezzlement and taking care of your brother-in-law and falsifying information in advertising and everything else? Wasn't that obvious, Daddy? And Daddy would say, well, we didn't know that at that time. We didn't have that kind of information. And the child would say, but wasn't it obvious? Because children of the future will not be educated as they are today to learn things that are totally irrelevant. Dickie Deer and the sheep on the way they met a cow. Moo moo, said the cow. Ba ba, said the sheep. You fill kids' heads with nonsense. Let me say this clearly. Children can learn geology, reforestation, they can learn the ocean sciences, marine biology, they can learn anything just as fast as you give them the Mickey Mouse Club. You are harming people when you do that. You hold them back. Children can learn anything. It's all in your head that you think they need for you to say, look at the little birdies singing. The birds don't sing. They make certain sounds. We call it singing. Birds are not singing. The world you live in is as full of shit as a Christmas turkey.
Well put. And I completely agree. And I had a question about that earlier, actually. People kind of have an idea that they think the fantasies that children are given are a part of some type of creative approach, when I think, and I agree with you, that the real creativity would come from critical thought and understanding the fantasy of nature. Nature is a fantasy. Well, the fantasy is the wrong word, but the beauty of nature and the amazing mysteries of nature, which we're endlessly discovering. So I think that's a terrific approach.
It gives them a good start when they learn reality instead of having to undo all the fairy tales that they learn. And the stories that they learn when they're young are horrifying.
That's true. Witchcraft and the stuff that kids read today, right.
And then your motion pictures today, which is the same story over and over again. And they even try to make movies about the future. But you know what they've got in those movies? Cowboys in space, with laser guns shooting people, dissolving other spaceships. That's not the future. That's the psychopath's notion of the future.
Yes.
It's a free enterprise system brought into the future.
Yes. Well, I'm still amazed, even right now, as to the fact that no positive film has ever come out about the future, and everything is always negative, everything is post-apocalyptic, or, as you put it, absolutely absurd. And do you feel that the establishment, why do you feel that the perception of the future has to be negative? Because most people you meet, they tend to feel this way.
People will make demands on society if they saw the truth. And they couldn't maintain the established system. If you ran a movie on the future and kept it fairly close to the probable state of technology, people would come out of the theater and say, why don't we have that now?
Yes.
Why are we struggling? Why do we go to work every day when we can automate and spend more time with our family? In other words, if industry was sane and a new machine came in, they would say to the help, now you work 4 hours a day, you can have a 1-month vacation instead of 2 weeks. That would be, no one would be against machines. But if they take in machines and they downsize, it's cheaper to get rid of you than to give you the benefits. And that's called the profit system.
Yes, absolutely. It's unfortunate that everything is, as you said, ass backwards. That's the way.
By the way, PJ, there are people that do wonderful things in industry, but they're out of business.
Sure.
No one will invest in a company that takes care of its health, that builds a playground for the children of the women that work there, or shares in the medical care for all the help. No one would invest in that company because the profit margin is lower. Do you understand that? Being a decent person is threatening in this kind of society, threatening to your perseverance in existence.
Absolutely. It's a self-perpetuating corruption. There's really no place for someone to be honest, and I think that's a very radical realization for most people that I speak with, because they just assume that it's pockets of corruption, and they don't understand that the entire thing is corrupt.
It has to be to operate. Look, a lawyer is not out to help people with problems. They're out to make money. They don't consider people with problems.
They don't care about the truth.
Very few lawyers. There are good lawyers. One of the greatest was Clarence Darrow, but that's many years ago. There are few lawyers that do good work, but there are doctors that do good work. They're called Doctors Without Borders. They really save up money, work, and they go to undeveloped countries and treat people free of charge. This is the incentive I'm talking about, the real incentive, not the monetary incentive. That's a sick, warped incentive perpetuated by culture.
Absolutely. I think Margaret Mead put it best when she said that the most rewarding actions that we have are the ones that help people, and they're not for monetary gain, and I think she was very right. And I think most deep down would agree with that. You have a lot of volunteerism in America and across the world, but unfortunately, everyone's still trapped in their pockets of corruption. So I believe the precedent is there to a certain degree. I'm sure you've seen that. There are people out there that do want to help, and that do want to do
that, but you take a very powerful person, say a very wealthy person, worth billions of dollars. I would say they're mentally ill.
I agree.
You don't need billions of dollars to survive. In other words, the people we admire today are the sick people of the establishment that have accumulated a great deal of wealth. That shows you how distorted the world is today. We should admire, of course we admire people in the past that worked for nothing, that made contributions to society and spent their life trying to help people. These are the people we admire. But really, after they die, hundreds of years later. But today, we admire the wrong people, the wealthy and the powerful. The most greedy people are the people we admire. So our society is distorted, very distorted, and I feel sorry for the shape of the future if we continue along these lines.
Yes, I absolutely. And I think you made a great point to me last time I saw you, where you commented that for someone to have billions of dollars is for them to consciously not want to care about all of those that die of starvation, because they're withholding that money which could help. And that's something people don't often think about.
That's a conscious withdrawal of efficiency.
Right.
They are hurting people, because the more people out there working on heart disease, cancer, is for your benefit. When you deprive labs of the equipment they need, not money, the equipment, that's why we call it a resource-based economy. We provide labs with whatever they need, because we have the resources, but we don't have enough money to build hospitals all over the world, but we have more than enough resources.
Yes, and that's the great realization. Absolutely. On a practical note, I wanted to bring this up because I think we have a very large audience today. And have you had any luck with having people help render some of your work? Because I wanted to throw this out there to the audience and try to get some people help with 3D renderings to continue to get this message out there.
We have a few, and they've already started doing some work, but we really need high-skilled renderers. We need more of them, actually, if anybody's interested in helping in that way.
Yes, please. They can go to your website and they can check that out.
Right. They can just send an email to the contact email on our website. Also, I wanted to mention that we give tours over here. People actually come from all over the world to spend practically a day with Jacque talking about this direction. We show them the models, we show them a 15-minute DVD, and we take questions. And if anybody's interested in that, to learn more about it, they can also contact us through the email on our website.
Yes, that's wonderful, and I highly recommend that to everybody. And as I mentioned before, guys, in the future I'm going to try and get a team of people down there that are very dedicated to this project, and we can have a conference.
Great.
Something else that I wanted to talk about publicly, because I'm gathering very dedicated people. We're very lucky to have a very large base of very honest, dedicated people that really want to push forward with this social direction. So hopefully very soon we can do that as well. We only have a few minutes left. Is there anything you guys want to say in conclusion?
You're right. That's what it takes to change things. In other words, Roxanne and I have no power at all. It's you people out there, if you understand what I'm talking about, do something about it. Don't sit down and make a verbal hobby of it. In other words, if you really believe in the world and people, we can save it. It depends on what you do, not what Roxanne and I. We spend all our time, and PJ spends all his time trying to enlighten people. So it's what you do that counts. Don't put it all on us. People send us continuous advice as to what to do. We're up to our necks in answering email, and we're just two people, and we have to maintain 22 acres and mow the grass and write the scripts and shoot the pictures and build the models and write the manuscripts and do books and publications. That's just Roxanne and I and PJ doing all this work. We need your help and participation.
That's what will make the transition. Otherwise, there won't be one.
I couldn't agree more, and that's one of the main things I attempt to advocate as much as possible, is that we have put this information out there, and people need to get as educated as they can and begin to take their own actions. And even if you have a 9-to-5 job, you can find an hour or two a week to help promote this direction in whatever way you can. So,
I can put it another way. I really don't want people to follow me. I don't want to build a following.
Sure.
I want people to listen to what I say. If it makes sense, do it. That's all the future is about, what we do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that's the best way to go. And people need to begin to think for themselves as well, which is, of course, very important, using these tools that we're putting out there. So, excellent. Thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Peter, for the opportunity. I appreciate this.
Absolutely, Noah. Yeah, I appreciate it very much. And I'll see you guys very soon, and have a wonderful rest of the weekend.
You too. Thanks a lot,
Okay.
Peter.
And have a wonderful life as well.
That's right.
Okay. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. I'm sorry I didn't get to go through all the questions. I keep thinking that I'm going to be able to get through the number that I put down, but as a general average, I can only get through about 30, it seems, 30 to 40 at this time. So, when we set up the forum Q&A, it's first come, first served. So the faster you get there, and hopefully through time I can attempt to do more frequent shows, but it's just been very difficult with my schedule, and sometimes things get up in the air, and that's why I'm doing this on a Sunday. So, but we'll see how it goes. And I also have to start working on the new film, which I've slowly been beginning, and that's going to take an outrageous amount of time. But I'm hoping to be able to keep the momentum with all of this, and hopefully the website will reach a point of much more cohesiveness and coherency, where it can function autonomously, where people can come in and they can know where to go, and so forth. So I really appreciate it, and I'm going to leave you guys with a small little tip from Gordon Gekko.
The richest 1% of this country owns half our country's wealth, $5 trillion. You got 90% of the American public out there with little or no net worth. I create nothing. I own. We make the rules now. The news, war, peace, famine, upheaval, the price of paper clips. We pick that rabbit out of the hat while everybody's just out there wondering how the hell we did it. Now, you're not naive enough to think we're living in a democracy, are you, buddy? It's a free market. Free market. I create nothing.